Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is sick and tired of being blamed for the loss of moderate Democrats during this election. During an interview with the New York Times, she warned that if the Biden administration does not put progressives in top positions, the party would lose big in the midterms. Now, the real problem in these campaigns, she says, was that the party had lacked core competencies to run these campaigns, but yet they are, of course, turning around, and instead of addressing those core competencies, they're going to blame leftists. In fact, here's what she said, quote, "There's a reason Barack Obama built an entire national campaign apparatus outside the Democratic National Committee. And there's a reason that when he didn't activate or continue that we lost House majorities, over 1,000 seats. Because the party in and of itself does not have the core competencies, and no amount of money is going to fix that." Look, and again, core competencies basically means knowing how to run a campaign and knowing how to reach voters where they're at so that they will turn out for you. If you run on a campaign of "I am not Donald Trump," and then don't go to listen to your voters, reach out to where they're at, knock on doors. Yes, there was a safe way to do that, masks and social distancing, and also don't spend money on ads that you need to spend a week before the election. You're not going to do very well. I know their whole, a lot of their entire campaign, some of these establishment, corporate Democrats, was "I'm not Donald Trump," and they hoped that they would ride the coattails on Joe Biden. And it's because, of course, that you had pollsters out there that were predicting much larger wins, much larger margins of voters turning out for Democrats, which unfortunately didn't pan out. And so they were expecting that, so they didn't put in the effort, they didn't put in the money, and they lost. Well, how the hell is that AOC's fault? It's not. But for them, it's much, much easier to punch left and to blame, quote-unquote, socialism and defund the police or Black Lives Matter. Look, it turns out, though, we know the real problem. You can't just drop millions of dollars on teams that don't have any idea what they're doing. And they don't understand their district. They're not tapped into the district's needs. It just doesn't work. And look, last week, I did a story on a Maine Democrat. This Maine Democrat is in a Republican district, and she's running on the Green New Deal. And she was running on increased investment in, public transportation. And she keeps winning. She keeps winning in that same district, by the way, where Suzanne Collins beat Sarah Gideon. And so she's far more progressive than Sarah Gideon was. Well, what's the difference? She actually went and talked to people. She traveled around, and she talked about this stuff to people. And she said, look, I'm not going to go and explain and talk about myself the whole time. I want to listen to what you need, what you want. I'm going to listen to your concerns. I'm just going to listen. And that's the difference. Because when you actually have a politician that gives a shit about you, you're more likely to be, somebody who turns out for them. If they show up for you, you will show up for them. That's how this works. And these corporate Democrats don't understand that. Abigail Spanberger does not understand that. Instead, she wanted to blame AOC. She wanted to blame the left. Now, AOC, for her victory, again, you guys remember her pair of shoes, where she ran around. She was knocking on doors until her shoes wore out. And then some. She connected with her district. Whereas the person that she had ran against, Crowley, barely ever went to the district, barely ever talked to anybody, had inherited that district from his family members. They had this long group of people, this long dynasty that just kept getting this, thing. And of course, nobody in the district really knew this guy at all. Well, of course, when AOC went there and said, I work in the community, I'm part of the community, I want to listen to the things that you care about, I want to represent you, well, then of course you're going to do better in that district. And so there's more. By the way, she said the failure of the party to operate an online strategy, quote, in a real way that exhibits competence made it hypocritical for the party to advance criticism of progressive messaging. And she uses this example. Quote, if I lost my election and I went out and said, this is all the moderates' fault. This is because you didn't let us have a floor vote on Medicare for all. And they've opened the hood on my campaign and they found that I only spent $5,000 on TV ads the week before the election. They would laugh. Yeah, they would not only laugh, but they would say, no, look, see, the left can't win. The left can never win because they're too far left. We need to go further right. We need to go further right. And she said that that's what they look like right now, trying to blame the movement for black lives for their loss. She added that the real grassroots activism that produced larger turnout in Detroit, Philly, and Georgia was crucial to Biden's win. Yes, that is activism. And she says that if the Democratic Party fails to recognize that and incorporate the grassroots into the party, that the party will disintegrate at the ballot box. And we have a lot of evidence of that. She said, it's really hard for us to turn out non-voters when they feel like nothing changes for them, when they feel like people don't see them or even acknowledge their turnout. The party believes that after 94% of Detroit went for Biden, after black organizers just doubled in triple turnout down in Georgia, after so many people organized Philadelphia, the signal from the Democratic Party is that John Kasich won us this election. I mean, I can't even describe how dangerous that is. Absolutely correct. 100%. Look, John Kasich couldn't even deliver Ohio to the Democrats. You've got to be kidding me. And here Biden was talking about, John Kasich elevated in our administration. You could be a cabinet member. Maybe. He was considering it. Whereas, you have the left. You have DSA candidates. These are Democratic Socialists of America, right? These are people that support Medicare for all. They ran on it. And they won a significant portion of their races. Whereas the moderate Democrats who ran on moderate positions, i.e. didn't really stand for anything other than we didn't like Donald Trump, well, they ended up losing. In fact, here's a handy-dandy chart that I want to show you of people who won and lost their races. And it's a bit simplified, but take a look. I mean, so did you support Medicare for all? Well, all those no's, a lot of them, even in Democratic-leaning districts, +5, +6, did they win their election? No, they lost in Florida. And yet you had places which were leaning Republican, or even people who actually supported Medicare for all, well, they ended up winning their elections. Weird. It's almost as if, you stand for something and you have a better chance at winning. It doesn't always work. Kara Eastman, unfortunately, lost to Don Bacon, which sucks. I really like Kara Eastman, and I hope she continues to try again. Sometimes it's that name recognition that you need more than anything in order to win your election. That said, look, instead of peeking in the hoods and doing your fair postmortem, you have Democrats who have lost that instead blame the left. They talk about defund the police. They talk about socialism. It's not just Abigail Spanberger. This morning, Jim Clyburn went on CNN and basically said the same thing. And he also said, nobody's more progressive than Jim Clyburn. Jim Clyburn, who takes millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry and will not support Medicare for all, and says, we're not a socialist party. Sure, man. Sure. And again, Clyburn is a legend in his own right. Back, his work for civil rights. But now, he's not as progressive as he thinks he is. At least now when it comes to policy issues like health care. And so, unfortunately, you have these politicians that are punching left. And on that, here's AOC's takeaway. Quote, I need my colleagues to understand that we are not the enemy. And that their base is not the enemy. That the movement for black lives is not the enemy. That Medicare for all is not the enemy. Again, 72% of exit poll voters, right? Or voters that were exit polled during this election, during the general. It's not the primary, during the general. 72% of them said, yes, we support a government-sponsored healthcare plan. Single player, Medicare for all. We support that. And of course, that makes sense because it's in the middle of a pandemic. Yes, that makes sense. That makes sense. And yet, no, it's running out of that, quote unquote, scary socialism. That's what lost us centrists our election. Sure. She said this isn't even just about winning an argument. It's that as if they keep going after the wrong thing. I mean, they're just setting up their own obsolescence. And appearing on CNN later on, after that interview, she also said this: progressives have assets to offer the party that the party is not yet fully leaned into. Every single swing state member that co-sponsored Medicare for All won their re-election. And so the conversation is a little bit deeper than saying anything progressive is toxic. It's not. It's not. What's toxic is corruption. What's toxic is taking money from large companies and then doing their bidding and then going against what the American people actually want. That's what's toxic in our political system. And what's toxic is the constant left punching. Look, this is not difficult to understand. You guys know I give centrists a lot of shit, right? But you know what? I wouldn't if you'd come our way in a couple of issues. Healthcare, for one. You would not only get our praise, but also our support. And not just our support, but also our backing. You run for re-election. Embrace Medicare for all. And look, we've seen this play out before, okay? Ed Markey is a good example. Ed Markey leaned in to the progressive movement. He said, I support the Green New Deal. I support Medicare for all. And guess what? The base turned out to support Ed Markey. You cannot say the same thing about the Lincoln Project people. Remember, Lincoln Project was all about appealing to Republicans in order to get them to vote for Joe Biden this election. Now, did that work? No. An even larger share of Republicans voted for Donald Trump this time than they did last time. 93%. So what did the Lincoln Project do? They took a bunch of liberal money and they lit it on fire. That's it. Look, progressives, we don't want to have to destroy the party, okay? We don't want to have to do that. What we want to do is we want to be able to work together. You got to come our direction. You got to come our direction. You got to come to the people's direction. And that's what AOC is saying. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.